Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Q&A sessions that are taking place today for the fifth Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. And I'm delighted to be joined by the lovely Christina Magro. She's the head of coaching at Capslock, and I actually had some coaching with Christina a few years ago, which was absolutely game changing and life changing for me. Since then, I've gone on to do so much of what was holding me back, and Christina really helped to unlock those things within me that were holding me back or making me think, oh, I shouldn't do that. And we did touch even then on the phenomenon of imposter syndrome before the day was launched. So welcome, Christina. It's a real pleasure to have you here today, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lisa. No, you're so kind and so lovely as always. It's a pleasure to be here. And you know how much this topic matters to me. So I'm really honored to be part of this fifth International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely no problem at all, Christina. I'm going to kick off by asking you. Um, it's said that around 70% of people suffer imposter syndrome at some point, and I must say I do have my thoughts on the other 30%. But have you personally encountered imposter syndrome in your career? And if you have, how did you navigate those feelings?
Oh my God, yes, Lisa, absolutely. I have encountered imposter syndrome several times in my career. I have retrained and I have reinvented my career several times. And I think in all those transitions, there has always been that element of doubting myself. So in all those moments where I had to prove myself all over again, learn new skills, be maybe in a new environment, those were the most triggering moments for me. But saying that, even now that I've been in the same position for quite a few years, those feelings keep coming back. There are times when I doubt myself. I doubt myself as a coach. I doubt myself as a professional, as a woman in cybersecurity. So there are still those moments. The way I navigate them, number one, I know that these are feelings that eventually pass and eventually subside. So I know these are not dangerous feelings. And as long as I have this sort of benchmark, as long as these feelings are not stopping me from doing what I want, then I accept them. I accept them as normal. I accept them as part of being human. And I carry on. I also try to remind myself, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, remind myself of how far I've come and of
Yeah.
all the nice feedback that maybe I've received lately. So I try to hype myself up a little bit from time to time.
Absolutely. And oh my goodness, I can absolutely resonate with so much of that. I've transitioned careers, and I've also struggled with that mindset of I don't belong in cybersecurity and tech. I don't have any right to be here or doing what I'm doing, or opportunities might come my way. And my first automatic thought is, they did not mean that for me at all. It was meant for somebody, for somebody else. And one of the biggest moments of imposter syndrome that I've ever had in my life was receiving a letter from the Cabinet Office saying that I'd been awarded an MBE for services to cybersecurity and diversity and
Wow.
inclusion, and that was nearly a couple of years ago. I can't tell you, in once I got over the initial shock, and my initial thought was this must be a scam of some sort, which is there's another story around that for another time. But once I established it wasn't, my very first thought was absolutely no way in the world was this meant for me. And that's always something that's really, that's the first thought that goes into my mind whenever something comes my way or somebody approaches me about an opportunity. Or if I get really good feedback about something I've done or a talk I've done and so on, my first thought was they didn't mean me at all. It was all meant for somebody else. Um,
Yeah.
so what would you say are some typical situations or challenges that tend to trigger those feelings of imposter syndrome, and particularly in your role as head of coaching among the cybersecurity learners at Capslock.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so common to encounter these sort of feelings within the cybersecurity learners at Capslock, simply because these are people, these are learners that are going into a new career. They are going to study something completely new to them. They are going to study that as part of a quite an intense course. So they're being assessed every day. They're being asked to prove themselves every day. They're being asked to grasp complex topics in quite a short period of time. So I can imagine that the self-doubt starts creeping in. I think another trigger is comparing yourself to your peers, comparing yourself to the people around you. And that's a big one because it's hard not to do when you are surrounded by other amazing people. Of course, you admire them. Of course, you notice their good qualities. And of course, maybe that causes you to think a little bit less about yourself. And that's when the feelings start to creep up. So these are some of the most triggering situations, I would say, situation where you learn something new, you're being assessed, you need to prove yourself. It's quite hard, and you're comparing yourself to other people. Quite a little mix.
Absolutely. And I get that whole thing about comparing yourself to other people, especially within, tech and cybersecurity. Especially when you see as well, somebody might have got a new job or a new role, or somebody as well might have gone, a lot further, a lot quicker than you have. And I know
Yeah.
it's sort of all too easy to really focus on those
Mm,
feelings of, why is it not me? Why am I not um, going as quickly as I perhaps
yeah.
would like.
And the
That's something as well.
Yeah, and there's also the whole thing about I don't have a technical background. That person is more
Yeah,
technical than me. That's a huge thing in cyber, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And oh my God, full disclosure, I don't come from that technical background. I spent a number of years before transitioning into the cybersecurity industry, working in the entertainment industry, where I worked in television for years. And I specifically worked with Chris Tarrant of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire fame at his management
Hmm.
company. But what I did have was a huge interest in all things to do with hacking and the psychology of hacking and cybersecurity as a result of my ex being very high up as a penetration tester and working with a lot of high profile government organizations and the MOD and so on. So I was always exposed to that world of hacking and
Yeah.
cybersecurity. And I had that huge interest, but oh my goodness, I didn't come from a technical background, and it's fair to say it was because of my ex that I made that transition into cybersecurity. And once I did back in 2009, I didn't look back. Um, and it's something that I get asked about all the time. Well, I don't
Hmm.
have a technical background, so cybersecurity is not for me. And that is one of the huge myths that I talk about a lot. And I've done a few talks that
Yeah.
bust those myths around cybersecurity. And that's one very big myth that I always like to dispel, that you don't need a technical background for cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
So moving on a little bit, and we're actually on a really sort of good topic about not coming from that technical background. So can you perhaps share some examples of transferable skills that you see from non-technical backgrounds that actually prove really valuable in cybersecurity roles and that perhaps might help dispel some of those feelings of imposter syndrome?
Definitely. I mean, the people that come to Capslock come with such a wealth of transferable skills, and they don't even realize they have them. So part of the work that I do as a coach with them is really uncovering these skills and uncovering these strengths with them in first instance, because this is what is going to make them special and unique in the marketplace. So we see people coming from all sorts of non-technical background. We've had a lot of teachers, a lot of people coming from medical professions, either nursing or doctors. We had a lot of people coming from hospitality, people coming just from, studying another subject. Honestly, any types of profession, we've had it. We've had someone coming from there. And I think, as you can imagine, people with those years of experience in that other area have learned very, very specific things. They know how to problem solve. They know how to relate to other people. They know how to communicate. They've got strong work ethics. And then, they have so many other transferable skills that you can only go and dig out once you are really thinking back to those moments in your previous career, and you're like, okay, what was I actually doing? What kind of skills was I employing to do that? Even though it might feel to them that they were just doing their job. But there is no such thing as just doing your job. In the act of just doing your job and going about your day to day, you are employing a wealth of skills that you are going to bring to another organization, and that employers are going to value. So all sorts of people that we see, and they've got so much potential, and we really help them discover that before they move forward.
Absolutely. And just sort of staying on that a little bit, if somebody is coming into the cybersecurity industry and they might be from that different background. So, for example, as you know, I've launched the book series, The Rise of the Cyber
Yes.
Women and the Varied Origins of the Cybermen. And I chose to do a volume that focuses on men who transition into cybersecurity because I thought it can't just be women. I'm sure there's some amazing men in the industry who didn't start out in
Yeah.
cyber and they transitioned into the industry from something very different. And as it turned out, I was absolutely spot on. And the first volume actually had somebody that had been a chef in the past and then made the
Yeah.
transition into cybersecurity. There's so many people that come from really different backgrounds. So, what strategies would you recommend for individuals to manage and overcome self-doubt when they might be making that transition into the cybersecurity industry and then start facing some complex topics or tasks within their career?
Definitely. There is such an important mindset shift to have when you start to approach new learning and complex learning like cybersecurity topics can be. And I think one of the best strategies is adopting a beginner mindset to the task. Forget the fact that you were an expert in your previous job. You're not going to feel that way anymore. You're going to feel quite uncomfortable. You're going to feel like you don't know. You're going to feel like maybe you don't understand. I think learners at Capslock are lucky because the way the course is structured is based on team-based learning, TBL.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a team around you. Everyone has got different strengths, and you learn to start leaning on other people and start relying on other people for your own learning as well. So there is this constant exchange of strengths and learning, and you're not alone in that process, which I think is super important when you're learning something new. And when you're doubting yourself, there is someone out there that can help you fill in those gaps, and you can help them fill those gaps as a result. I also recommend people to keep track of what they are achieving and how far they are coming. And I always tell people, think about the time when you just started the course and you maybe were listening to a podcast, Darknet Diaries or whatever. And then think about yourself now listening to that podcast. How much more do you understand? That's so indicative of how far you've come, how much you've learned, even without realizing sometimes, because people forget going through the motions about all of the things that they didn't know before and they do now. Yes.
Absolutely. And just staying on that, I'm talking about embracing that beginner mindset. Um, how can learners perhaps cultivate something like that in terms of the beginner's mindset? And what practical steps do you think that they can take for that approach during their transition from one industry into cybersecurity?
I think one thing that you can cultivate and one thing that you can keep in mind in order to keep always that perspective is curiosity. So as long as you
Yeah.
approach everything with curiosity, with a curious mind, um, you're going to feel positive about the things that you don't know because you're there to discover them. You're not there to master them all of a sudden. And always to remind you of using the word yet when you talk about your learning. So I don't understand networking yet. Because that adds that perspective that, you know what, you're a work in progress, you're here to learn, you're not the finished product, and you're not going to be the finished product by the time the course ends. Lisa, I mean, you're a
Mhm.
seasoned cybersecurity professional now, and still you're here learning.
Yeah.
It's still you feel like, okay, this is something new that I want to learn. This is something new that I want to know more about. So the learning never stops. And I think adopting that perspective of becoming a lifelong learner rather than an expert, it's a little bit reassuring.
Absolutely. And just touching on that word, expert within the cybersecurity industry, I personally absolutely hate it. And I never use it in relation to myself. And that's because there's so many different facets to cybersecurity and so many different specialisms in the industry. Not one person, I believe, can actually be an expert in everything to do with cybersecurity. So I always am very clear to position myself as saying I'm a cyber awareness specialist because my expertise is in a particular area of cyber, which is around social engineering, cyber awareness training, and cyber psychology and the human elements of cyber.
Mhm.
And then recently, I was actually featured in my local newspaper for something entirely different and unrelated to cyber because I actually have my first poetry book collection coming out next week.
Hi,
And so the local paper
nice.
ran a story on that. But the headline was pegged cybersecurity expert launches poetry book. And I just, head in my hands because I was just like, no, I
No.
just don't like that word expert. And I have gently tried to steer my sort of local paper to say, can you, I don't mind the cybersecurity bit, but specialist is more, appropriate. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, no, they still use the word expert. And that's not my imposter syndrome sort of creeping in at that point. It's more about I have a particular specialism within the
Hmm.
cybersecurity industry.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, and I hate being referred to as that.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to talking a little bit about the role of community. And community is something that is really big for me and something
Yeah.
that led to me launching the UK Cybersecurity Association and then launching Cybersecurity Unity a few years later. And unity being the operative word to foster that sense of community within the industry. So, how important would you say that community support is in combating feelings of imposter syndrome? And what opportunities does Capslock provide for their students and for that peer-to-peer engagement?
Yes, community is so important. And I'm glad, you mentioned your work in this space because it's so it is so much easier for someone coming into the industry when they manage to find their people and when they manage to find their community and when they start seeing themselves as part of that space. And in Capslock, we try to do just that. There are not only the tutors supporting our learners, there is myself as their coach, there is a full team dedicated to careers advising. So And there are the mentors as well, the industry mentors. So learners can find support from any angle, sometimes even too much support there, you know. But it's so important for them to feel like, you know what, you don't need to do this alone. You can rely on us, you can rely on your team members. And we have brilliant examples of teams of learners who stay together long after the course. They support each other in finding jobs. They keep hyping each other up, even on LinkedIn. And it's so lovely to see, you know, the community support that they managed to build there. It's also so lovely to meet our learners at different events. So they're trying to go out, network, go to different types of events and chat with people and realize, you know what? These are my people. I like these people. I feel at home here. I think that makes all the difference, whether you can mentally visualize yourself as part of that or not. Because once you can visualize yourself as part of something, all of a sudden things become more possible and more real in your mind. And that's what it takes for you to not give up.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more about finding those people and that sense of community. And it's certainly something that I found when I first transitioned into the industry, and certainly since then, how welcoming everybody is,
Yeah,
how everybody's, willing to help and pass on, their knowledge. And a key thing, no question is, off the table, so to speak. Yeah, I had
definitely.
some questions that I just felt, oh my goodness, I can't possibly, ask this, and perhaps sort of look as if I don't know anything. But I do remember um, Dr. Emma Philpott, MB, who's now gone on to lead IASME, who does Cyber Essentials. I met her very early on in 2009 when I first transitioned into cyber. And she was one of my very early role models and mentors, and continues to be to this day. I've learned so much from Emma, and I know that I can, message her with a question, and even if I feel it's, perhaps I look a bit, daft at asking that. I know that I can get, a response, and no question is, um, off the table. Moving on a little bit to, measuring progress, because as we said, it's all, too easy to, not sort of look at our achievements as being exactly that,
Hmm.
big achievements. So, what methods would you suggest, not just for learners at Capslock, but for anyone, to track and reflect on their progress to, counteract those feelings of imposter syndrome?
Definitely. It's so important, first of all, to keep track on your achievements, especially if if you know that you are having some imposter feelings. Because actually, as I was researching imposter syndrome as part of my MA, I realized that actually one of the few evidence-based intervention for imposter syndrome that worked is listing your achievements. So an easy thing that anyone can try, just literally get an Excel file or a Word file, whatever you prefer, and start writing down everything that you feel you have achieved throughout your career. Really go back in time and start remembering those moments. And it will take a while because our brain is not wired that way. Our brain is not wired to remember the good things. Our brain goes straight to the negative, goes straight to the what went wrong, what I haven't done, the mistakes, because it's just, a way for it to keep us safe. So it will take a while, but you'll start feeling like, okay, now my brain is working in a different way and it's starting to spot the positives. And this will help you. This will help you feel like, okay, I have made some progress. I have done certain things. And this will help you not only feeling better with yourself, but if you are a career changer, if you are going into, if you are in a job hunting process, this is a very precious way to keep track of everything you've done for your CV, but also for interviews, to give you like good examples of times when you went above and beyond, on times when you solved certain challenges, you rised above certain things that happened. And these are all really good moments to talk about in an interview to really get your future employer understand what you're made of and what you can achieve when you're at your best.
Absolutely. And I'm a huge fan of bullet journaling and crafting. So I actually have a dedicated bullet journal where on a Friday afternoon, I always try to finish whatever I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
work-wise by about sort of past 3, 4 o'clock. And then at that time, I will actually look back over the week and I'll write down all the achievements that I've had over that week. No, no matter how small, and some might actually be quite big achievements.
That's such a
But no
great
matter how
idea.
but no matter how small, I list all my achievements for that week. And I always try to do that on a Friday afternoon towards the end of the day. And then I've got that to look back on and go,
Yeah.
gosh, and even when I was laid up with the flu in February, I was still online and still keeping on top of things as best I could. And even that I noted because as ill as I felt in February, it was a massive achievement to not
Yes.
get as behind as I thought I would get. So I even noted, that down. Um, and I've also started to have a couple of days or so a month where I have computer-free days because even at the weekend, sometimes I'll go on and start writing or researching, especially for a book project that I'm doing at the moment. So I always try to make sure that I have that time. And it almost sounds counterproductive, but having that sort of time away has actually helped my levels of imposter syndrome
Yes.
a bit as well, and getting out into nature, walking a lot more, and so on. And I definitely think it all helps. So I think find what works for
Yeah.
you as an individual is definitely something that I would say. Um, so just moving on to beyond Capslock and obviously what you're involved with there as head of coaching. Are there any long-term strategies, would you say, that professionals could employ to continually manage and reduce any feelings of imposter syndrome throughout their careers?
Definitely. I mean, I'm glad that you're mentioning long-term strategies because
Mm,
this is certainly not something that you can overcome from one day
yeah,
to the other. This is not something that people overcome ever. There are a lot of people that have worked for years and years and years and still have the odd feeling of self-doubt from time to time. So it's just normal. It's part of being human, and it's something that we can definitely accept. At the same time, we can use strategies to help us kind of tune down a little bit the volume of the inner voice telling us that we're not good enough sometimes. And I think the most powerful thing is to keep working on yourself, keep
yeah,
self-reflecting, keep understanding that not everything that you think is absolutely true, and that negative thoughts are automatic, they happen, but it doesn't mean that you need to believe them. So keep doing that sort of work. Therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy helps a lot, even just to do for a short period of time to understand the mechanisms and to understand how to really master your thinking and master your thoughts so that you can choose to have better thoughts, more helpful thoughts that are going to make things easier for you, for sure. And also what you mentioned earlier, Lisa, is so important, self-care.
mhm,
Once we start loving and respecting ourselves, respecting our time, respecting our resources, I feel like it's easier to develop that sort of self-compassion and to
yeah,
understand, okay, this is how I'm feeling. I can be kind to myself. And, normalize these sort of feelings. Understand that the people around you are potentially feeling that way too. So another powerful strategy is to talk about how you're feeling. Show that vulnerability. What you'll find is that the more you talk about it, the more people are like, yeah, I feel that way too.
yeah,
I can completely relate to that. Um, and imposter syndrome, I find that once you take away that secret, because imposter syndrome is all about keeping a secret, you're keeping the
mhm,
secret that, maybe people will find out that you are not as good
yeah,
as you think you are. Once you take away that secret and you say, this is how I'm feeling. I feel like, I'm doubting myself at this moment in time. I feel like I'm not good enough. What will happen is that those feelings, you take the power away from imposter syndrome. You find a shared experience in other people. And guess what? You can all move on together, supporting each other and realizing that it's okay, it's normal, and you can still do what you want to do and you can still be successful.
Absolutely. And oh my goodness, I couldn't agree with that more. And that's exactly why myself and my co-founders, Nat and Kim, founded this day 5 years
Yes.
ago to really open up that conversation and to let people know that might be listening, to this and to the other talks that we've had today, so that they know that they're not alone if they're experiencing those feelings, and to really open up that conversation and not just have those conversations around sort of putting their hands up and saying, yes, I do suffer from imposter syndrome, but have some, actionable strategies and things that can help in terms of, and I will never say overcoming or conquering imposter syndrome. I personally don't believe it's something that you can ever truly get over. I personally prefer to think of it more in terms of managing those feelings of,
Yes.
of imposter syndrome. For me, that's a really important distinction to make. So we're coming to the end of our time for this discussion today, Christina, and it's been so good to have you on today to talk about imposter syndrome. So, as we wrap up, are there any final things that you might like to share for anybody that might be listening to this today?
Just the recommendation of reminding yourself that this is all normal. Don't let it stop you from doing the things that you want to do, and go and have a chat, go and have a chat with Lisa, go and have a chat with other people that you trust within the industry that you operate in. And what you'll find is that you'll find a lot of advice and you'll find a lot of encouragement. So choose to believe that and choose to give it a try. Give yourself a chance to succeed and doing what you want to do.
Christina, thank you so much for joining me today on the Fifth Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. I know that our audience is going to get some really good insights from everything that you've shared. And we hope to welcome you back to next year's event as well. There are some more talks and things going on our social media channels today. So do please keep tuning in to what we've got coming up, and head over to our Facebook page and to our social media channels and engage with us on there, because today is all around opening up that important conversation around imposter syndrome. So, Christina, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa. My pleasure.
Okay.
Lovely catching up.